I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you. And for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money. I didn't allow you to have anything on the board. I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed.
All right, today we're going to be talking about some issues that you may or may not be aware of. We'll be talking about Leonard Peltier, AIM, the Indigenous Peoples Liberation Party, the African People's Socialist Party, the United Nations, and Christian nationalism, but not ICE or other racially based atrocities right now, because they're all related. This is other stuff that you need to be aware of. So today I'm going under the veil, right? So much of our information, our history, and our education is suppressed. It is hidden. It is rewritten. We must remain diligent in sharing information here on social media and in our real lives. So please share information that you might have in the chat for the replay gang, in the comments. Give us recommendations for readings and anything else that you think is important. Leon's really good about sending me lots of stuff. So in that vein, let me say hi to some people. Adric is here first. He says, it's on. Auntie is here with hi and the peace sign, my favorite auntie. Adric says it's showtime. Leon is here. What's up, Leon? Adrian is here. He says, let's go. Cosmic Surfer is here. He says hello to Maggie in the most amazing chat on YouTube. That is correct. This is the best live tribe on YouTube, bar none. Can't convince me otherwise. All right, Leon's going to start some mess with Adrian and Marcus. Adric says, let's hear it for the dancing Maggies. Leon says, African People's Socialist Party, aka the FBI and CIA, ran in their organizations and claimed they were talking to Russians at the start of the pandemic. Yeah, I saw that. And Auntie says, thank you for bringing up Leonard. Auntie's the one who taught me about Leonard Peltier. All right. Okay, let's get started. Adric, you are correct. The live tribe rules. And shout out to the replay gang. All right, so let's get started. I have tons and tons of information to show you guys. I really don't even have a script this time. It's literally an outline. So this is very different from how I normally do it. So I might have technical issues here and there, just explaining that ahead of time, or it might take me a little time to pull things up. I am thanking you ahead of time for your patience. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to look at is African migrants to Israel. We are human beings too. So in this, let me shut that off. All right, so in this article, you know, look at all these people. This is, I think it's 30,000 African refugees protest in Robin Square outside of Knesset, Tel Aviv, Israel. Isn't that what? Did you guys know that there were that many African refugees in Israel. So it starts out with this scene should hugely embarrass all Israelis and supporters of Israel. So maybe it was 30,000. Am I reading it wrong? It is 30,000. I'm sorry. 30,000. Tens of thousands of African immigrants are demonstrating, demanding to be treated as human beings within a state that claimed to be created as a safe haven for immigrants. So this is a lie that is exposed for all to see. Did you guys hear anything about this? I didn't hear anything about this. Maybe you guys did. So refugees are protesting and marching, setting up camp in public squares in front of embassies, hoping that it will provide them opportunity to live in peace with Israel. Let me see when this is. This is all the way back in 2014. So this is before we all heard about how Israel is. Okay. It's 11 years ago when they were pulling messy crap. Okay. So the African Globe points out that Israel does not want them. And last year, it completed a formidable fence on the Egyptian border that's doing an effective job of keeping what Israelis call illegal infiltrators. Does that sound familiar? Illegal infiltrators from reaching the promised land. If Israel acted according to its obligations under the 1951 Refugee Convention, right, which is freshly minted, and Israelis had a role in creating that, right, because they were the refugees, they would review the claims of the refugees. The problem being, they created a work camp. So not only were they segregating off and pushing off all the Palestinians, all of the African refugees were put into work camps as well. And have we heard anything about them? I don't know where they are. Are they dead? Did they kill them off when they were bombing Palestine? I don't know. So where it says this means in effect indefinite detention, work camps, being detained, that's jail, right? The agency scolded Israel for calling them illegal infiltrators rather than asylum seekers. Boy, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? And said Israel's current policy and practices create fear and chaos among asylum seekers, not taking into account their specific situation. So this was going on back in 2014, but in the United States, was this like world news? Did we get to hear about this? Was this on the news every night that they were putting African refugees into work camps? Nope. And this is where I got the title for today, okay? Where it says, being Black is not a crime, right here. Being Black is not a crime. Now, if anybody knows what happened to these Black people, these African people, I should say, let me know. Because now I'm concerned that they bombed them first. Look at that. Did you guys know about that? It says, imagine a nation, most of whose inhabitants believe their state is and must be Jewish. This is Zionism, remember? Now imagine 65,000 non-Jews streaming into it from the dark, and it literally says fetid, south from the heart of Africa. It's a colonizer's worst nightmare, the Black hordes. Where have we heard that before? We literally heard that in somebody describing Washington, D.C. So hopefully we can figure out where these people are. Hopefully Egypt opened the border and let them in. But as of the writing of this article, Egypt said, we don't want them either and would not let them in. So much like Palestine, they get stuck, in between. There's a brick wall that the border that they're up against, that Israel's pushing against, and there's nowhere to go. This is crabs in a barrel. Wild, huh? Okay. Let me look at some. Oh, Spain Man's here. Hi, Spain Man. Hi, Red Pill Sleeper Cell. I haven't seen you in a long time. Leon says, I believe that small state sent those Africans to the Muslim trade, which we have seen on TV. When you say Muslim trade, are you talking about like slave trade? I don't necessarily, on my channel, I don't, because it's so small, I don't necessarily really watch the words because I don't ever get flagged. Even all those other shows that I did, I never got flagged. So you can go ahead and say it in there in what you want to say. So Adrian says, Egypt won't let them in because they know once they do, Israel will press even harder for Egypt to take them all. And the Arabs don't, the Arabs are the prime population in Egypt now. So they don't tend to want to let people in. All right. So let's talk about Leonard Peltier. Put a 1 in the chat if you've heard of Leonard Peltier. When I mentioned him to Adrian, he was like, oh yeah. So I think I was just catching up. So Auntie had to teach me a little bit, but I want to show you some video clips of Leonard Peltier and him talking about AIM. This is an interview that he did on Democracy Now!, which I do. I like their show. Seems pretty. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for being here. All right, so let's watch a little bit of the video.
We spend the hour with longtime Indigenous activist Leonard Peltier. In February, he was released from a federal prison in Florida after spending nearly half a century behind bars for a crime he says he did not commit. President Biden, on his last day in office, commuted Peltier's life sentence to home confinement. Biden's decision came after mounting calls by tribal leaders and supporters around the world in a decades-long community-led campaign fighting for his freedom. In the 70s, Peltier was involved with AIM, the American Indian Movement. In 1975, 2 FBI agents and 1 young AIM activist were killed in a shootout on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. 2 AIM members were later arrested for killing the agents. At trial, the jury acquitted them. Leonard Peltier was arrested later, tried separately, and convicted. Peltier has always maintained his innocence. Notable supporters of Leonard Peltier over the years included Nelson Mandela, Pope Francis, and Amnesty International. Supporters of Peltier say his trial was marked by gross FBI and federal prosecutorial misconduct, including the coercion of witnesses, fabricated testimony, and suppressed exculpatory evidence. After being released in February, Leonard Peltier returned home.
Okay, so that's kind of the history of Leonard Peltier and where we are now. So even though his sentence was commuted, he was resentenced to home. So let's hear about his home confinement.
Actually, what happened was I was taken out of one prison cell and really put into another type of prison. But this is my home now. This is my home. So it's a million times better.
Wait, what do you mean when you say you were taken out of your prison cell after more than 49 years, and you're saying that you're not completely free?
No. I'm on very restrictive restrictions. Even to go to the post office, I call her my handler. I have to call her to go to the post office. Then when I get back, I have to call her and tell her I'm back. Or if I go anything, if I go shopping or whatever, I have to do that. If I have to go 100 miles past the nation, I don't call my place a reservation either. We're nations of people. I have to get a pass, usually from Washington, D.C. to go to usually medical or religious ceremonies on different native nations.
Okay, so he's on house arrest, right? Home confinement. That's not really commuting a sentence, is it? I mean, we know the Sixers, the J6ers, right? Their sentences got commuted for really heinous, violent crimes. They just go home, go back to work. It wasn't like this. So this is a bit different type of commuting, apparently. So let's keep watching.
Well, as I went through the years filing for pardons and stuff, Ronald Reagan was the first one to promise to leave me, pardon me. Somebody in Washington stopped it. There's only one organization that could have stopped it and didn't have the power to stop it, but still somehow are in power enough to where they can override the President of the United States, our Congress. It's the FBI. And Reagan promised to let me go. And the FBI intervened, and that was stopped. And Bill Clinton and Obama. And finally we get to Biden. And Biden, there was pressure put on him from all over the world. Almost every tribal nation here in the United States filed for my release, demanding my release. The United Nations did a full report on my case, and they demanded that I be released immediately and to be paid, quote unquote. Hundreds of Congress and senators and millions of people.
Then the Pope.
And the Pope, the last Pope and the current Pope, and world leaders, many world leaders demanded my release.
The Nobel Peace Laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu?
Yes, I was also nominated nominated 4 times because of my work from prisons for a Nobel Prize. And the board and everything granted it, but somebody intervened again. So 4 times I lost that. I think somebody was pushing Biden to stop any possibility of signing a pardon.
This reminds me of Assata Shakur, right? Like being found guilty in a kangaroo court. The world sees the situation differently. I mean, being put up for a Nobel Peace Prize 4 times while you're in prison, that's got to say something. You've got popes, you've got all these people saying, no, should be free, should be free, should be free. But who's calling the shots? The FBI, right? Now, I want to make a point right here because for the people who watch me often, I've been doing a lot of shows about the indigenous Black Indians. And I see out there a lot, not a lot, but I do see people put out that the only indigenous people were Black people, that, people who look like Leonard Peltier were not indigenous. I tend to look at the writings and the maps and the different things, and the farther north you went, the more they looked like Leonard Peltier, and the farther south in the country that you went, the more African looking these tribes looked, and these are the ones who were reclassified as Negro to be able to be enslaved. The thing is I think some of this conversation gets into arguing between the Siberian-looking Native Americans, like Leonard Peltier, and the African-looking indigenous Indians, and they're being pitted against each other. And this reminds me of something that I heard, that people who make $100,000 a day are telling people who make $25 an hour that their enemy is the person who makes $7 an hour. Like, it's unnecessary. Yes, there was a tribe that owned slaves. There was. Not all. One. And the people who owned the slaves were like 1/8 native, and they only claimed the native so they could get land. So I think this is some of the information that needs to come out, that yes, they have found bones in southern, what we would call North America, that are indigenous, or that are African in nature, that are like 100,000 years old, but they also have proof that the Siberian looking Native Americans have been here for like 20, 30,000 years. At some point, everybody's got a claim. It's a pretty big continent. It's not huge, obviously not the biggest, but I think we need to view all of the indigenous as the indigenous. Side note, when people are talking about Bad Bunny and they're like, you need to speak the native language of the land, ask them which Native American tribe they're speaking about. Adric says the J6ers were enlisted. That's the difference. I mean, if we're talking about they're put into ICE, yeah, probably. Vincent is here. Hi, Vincent. Auntie says, thank you for bringing Leonard to light here. Yeah. Auntie I'm going to shout her out a little bit, back in the day, protested for the release of Leonard Peltier. So this is somebody that she has supported for probably, am I safe to say 40 years? Like a long time, a long time. So that was pretty interesting. Okay, so now I'm going to bring up the Indigenous Peoples Liberation Party. This is a pretty interesting article. Let me find it. There we go. Okay, we'll share that. So this is Warrior Publications. Okay. Now they're talking about the Indigenous Peoples Liberation Party of Canada. So you can see the badge that they have, right? They had this event in Canada. This is 2015, right? Flanked by the Indigenous Peoples Liberation Party of the USA and the African Peoples Socialist Party of the USA, right? They were working on consolidation work. So what needs to happen from the powers that be? Oh, well, they pit everybody against each other. So the IPLPK is a revolutionary Indigenous organization. Primary focus is to unite Indigenous people to resist ongoing colonization. Now, why was the African People's Socialist Party there? Well, because a lot of the people at that time were recognizing that there were African looking or African descended indigenous people in North America. But then, people got to be pitted against each other. So it's interesting that, up in Canada, people were working together. Now, an interesting thing that I want to highlight here, the party is anti-capitalist. We consider to be snakes in the grass those neo-colonial wannabe settlers who administer Ottawa and Washington, D.C.'s colonial regimes and promote ideologies of Indian capitalism that would seek to Indigenous people into the parasitic society of the colonial oppressor nation. They are enemies of our people. Globally, we recognize that only the total overturning of the current parasitic capitalist world system can ensure not only our own liberation, but the liberation of all oppressed and exploited peoples around the world. So what they're saying to put in place is a type of indigenous socialism. So it says, we strive for a society in which all land, resources, and labor are divided in a way that is just to all members of our nations and the ecosystems in which we are embedded. We seek to live in a way that honors the 7 generations before us and provides for the 7 generations that will come after us. Now, did it say anywhere in indigenous socialism that any retribution, that, they're going to kill the white man, that they're going to, go after the white man, that they're going to treat the white man the way the white man? No. It literally said that everything is fair. Equity. That's all they were looking at, is equity. All right, I'm falling behind in the chat. Leon says, I suntan in the South. It just says, think about the landscape at the time. They did what they did to Leonard at the same time that they were framing Assata Shakur. Yes, true. In the same way. And that all had to do with the FBI, right? Leon says, African People's Socialist Party. I'll send you the video. The FBI took their computers and everything. I did see, once they accused them of collaborating with Russia, that they tried to destroy them. Yep. Adric says, J6ers acquitted, colloquially speaking, enlisted by the Orange Man. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. And I agree, Vincent. Adrian says, also keep in mind, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act amendments of 1975 that Natives were given full rights. Right. So the civil rights that they were trying to promote, although they didn't have much of a population to fight, but they were fighting, and they've been fighting, especially for their land rights and their water rights. You know, the African American people who were out there getting hosed with fire hose and really marching for civil rights, the civil rights that were gotten also benefited Native Americans as much as it could, because we do know that a lot of those rights ended up benefiting different populations that it wasn't intended to. So the African People's Socialist Party, I'm going to pull this up. Okay. So this is the African People's Socialist Party website. Okay. Principled struggle since 1972. Isn't that an interesting way to say that? Our philosophy is African internationalism. Right here it says we need a revolution, not simply to study and understand the world, but to transform it. Isn't that interesting? Right? Here's all the platform, the theory, some official statements, right? It is Pan-African. This party is Pan-African. They are still posting things on this website, but if you just Google them, it tells you different things about the Russian collusion, right? But they are still posting things. They do still exist. So if this is something that you're interested in, then I highly, highly recommend looking into them and seeing what they're doing and seeing if this is something that you would be interested in yourself to maybe looking into. Especially people who are Pan-African. I think this is something maybe that could bolster what they're already doing. All right. So let's talk about another movement that has to do with Canada's Indigenous movement. Okay, here is this one. Now, this is some overlap. Again, remember how I brought up Israel in the beginning? So Innu, and that's the Inuit. So if it's a single person, they are Innu. If it's talking about the people, they are Inuit. And it is considered derogatory to call them Eskimo because that was a name that their colonizers gave them. And if you didn't see my video on it, it was originally a French word, Esquima. So, but this Innu land defender was arrested by Israeli police. Okay. I love how they reclaim Turtle Island. Right. This is also still in 2014. This is why I say under the veil. This is history that is hidden. So this is from Palestine to Turtle Island, unite against colonialism, against imperialism, against apartheid, and against racism. So Innu land defender and anti-colonial organizer Mateo Du Pakuakami is 24 in 2014 from the community of Mashteuwash, has been arrested in the occupied territories of Palestine by Israeli police. He's a member of the Wabak Collective and has been involved in organizing against the Line 9 tar sands pipeline and Plan Nord in his territories. So here he goes over to Israel to protest because he sees, what's going on with the Palestinians and possibly with the Black people, the Africans who were in these work camps that we never got to hear about, right? So he goes over to protest and gets arrested. So the statement from the Wabak Collective is Mateo has been arrested by the chosen people. And those are capitalized. That's how they refer to them. The chosen people, not chosen by their God, but that these chosen people call themselves the chosen people. That's what they've named their own tribe, with no valid declaration or motivations behind the arrest made by the Israeli police. The members of the Wabat Collective are scared for what's going to happen next. Mateo is in the custody of the Israeli state, according to a comrade who has recently been released from detention by the state of Israel. She was detained for declaring at the frontier that she was there to support Palestinian children to rebuild their schools. We hope Mateo will be released by tomorrow morning, but suspect he will be locked up in jail unless he is deported to Canada. These deportations are financed by the imposed apartheid in Palestine. So people working together for quite a while. Then down here it says the Israeli state is also targeting Black migrants using concentration camp tactics to promote white supremacy and further subjugate people of color. Justice for migrants is tied directly to Indigenous sovereignty to end relocation, white supremacy, and the attack on racialized bodies. Had you heard of this? Isn't it interesting that this is 2014? Now, some of us kind of had heard about Nakba. That's before, I was born. So much hidden. So much hidden. It's wild. Okay, let me take this down. All right. So that is the Inuit movement. And obviously, they are marching for everyone. Okay. Adrian says, fun fact, Israel routinely provided training and resources to the apartheid Boers of South Africa. I'd heard of that. And I'd also heard that the IDF does a lot of training of police departments in the United States. Spain Man says chosen by Moloch, I bet. I mean, and obviously, since I didn't play my disclaimer, let me just say this right now. When we're talking about these people, we're either talking about Zionism, which has a huge overlap to elitism and white supremacy, where small-hatted people or Jews are concerned. I definitely am not talking about the everyday Jewish person who's trying to be a good person, who's trying to follow God as they see fit, who's trying to be helpful for others. There are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish people, especially in North America, who are protesting Zionism happening in Israel. So definitely not talking about the entirety collective of Jewish people. I'm talking about the elitists, the Zionists, the white supremacists that are doing these things. So just to be clear, I have too many times people to come in my comments and call me all kind of dumb. I just had a post recently. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was on YouTube. And the person said that, one, obviously I was dropped on my head as a baby. And number two, that I should be forcibly remanded to a mental asylum for the stuff that I say. And I find it funny. I find it funny because obviously you didn't listen to anything that I said. Right. And Spain Man says, of course. Yeah, I was just saying that for myself. I also don't want to make it look like anybody in my amazing chat would lump all people together. In fact, I would suffice it to say that most, if not all, of the people in my live tribe understand not turning people into a monolith. So they're not going to do it either. All right. So let's talk about, so we've been talking about the Indigenous of North America, which is the United States and Canada. That whole thing is North America. So, all the way up in Canada are people who look mostly all Siberian because of the land bridge, right? And this is where these people came across 20, 30,000 years ago. So the farther south they get and the more they mix with other tribes, then the darker they get. So still resemble, think about in New Mexico, the Indigenous still resemble, they have some resemblances to Siberian people. However, they're dark skinned, right? So, 30,000 years is a long time. People change over time. So Auntie says, I can guarantee you were never dropped on your head. Thank you. Thank you, Auntie. Leon says the Jay-Z's have said some, oh, the Jay-Z. Now I get it. I always wondered why people were talking about Jay-Z. Like I was thinking of the person. Now I get it. The Jay-Z's have said some wild stuff to everyday Jewish people. Oh yeah, they've abused and killed their other Jewish people. Think about the Hannibal directive that they have. They're fine with, few cracked eggs, right? I heard everything from death to future babies, etc. Yeah. Zionists are not in support of the everyday Jew either. So it's political. It's not religious. They use religion as an excuse and a shield, right? When it benefits them. And then all of a sudden they're secular and it's heritage and it's blood when it benefits them. But everything they're doing is political. So it's a political party and they just make everything anti-Semitic. Oh, I'm sorry, Adrian. Listen, and Adrian knows this as well as Auntie and everybody else. I can be really, really intelligent sometimes, but also kind of an airhead sometimes. So, now I get it now that it's on here. So, all right, let's talk about the UN Council on Black Americans. Let me get this pulled up. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is CERD. All right, so this is nope, I didn't want the recommendations. I got two CERD things going on, so let me get the right one. This one is dated 2022. I will find it. I swear to Pete, I will find it. Well, I think it might be this one. So let's just go through. Like I told you, I have so many things to go through. I've got them all mixed together. No, I want to go with the oldest one first. Okay. So this is August 2023. This is an in-depth UN report. You guys can pull up this article, right? This PDF. You can download the PDF. You can print it. This is from a General Assembly, and it's implementation of the International Decade for People of African Descent. Now, Black people in America, in North America, did you know about this? The International Decade for the People of African Descent, starting in 2023, 2024. Did you know? Kind of feel like it was probably suppressed. So what the summary, right? The summary that this is about, because this is 18 pages, okay? The present report, submitted pursuant to General Assembly Resolution 6916, focuses on reparatory justice for people of African descent. Did you all know about this? This is the UN. It acknowledges increased acceptance of the need to address the continuing impacts of enslavement and colonialism, including through reparatory justice. It takes stock of existing frameworks and initiatives and identifies areas for further consideration. Drawing on the observations and recommendations of United Nations bodies and experts and contributions from stakeholders, the Secretary General recommends that states take a comprehensive approach grounded in international human rights law that seeks to address legacies of the past in order to build societies that are free from systemic racism and racial discrimination. To achieve these objectives effectively and the approach should be participatory, gender sensitive, and inclusive, and should combine a plurality of measures. Plurality, meaning coming at it from different directions. So for those people who are like, we only need money, maybe need more than that. For people who say, no, just give us like free college and a break on stuff. No, more than that. Reparatory is all the way around. It is holistic and inclusive. And I personally, now, I obviously would not be getting any of this money, but I agree with them that it should be coming from a plurality of measures, including money. Don't ever take it to say that I didn't say it includes money. It most definitely includes money, including, where appropriate, restitution, money, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. So you know how in Germany, when they say never again, never again, never again, never again, that. How do we make damn sure that this does not get repeated? All right, let's look at some comments. Spainman says the real users of human shields. Adrian says, I believe I read about that. And the UN has been clear about the need for reparatory justice. Yeah, I'm going to talk about several UN things. Because again, sometimes to get a real clear picture of what's going on in the country and even the state that you live in is to look for news outside of the country and the state in which you live. That's how you get the most unbiased information. Adrian says, now I remember Kamala Harris spoke about this before her campaign tour. Oh, okay. Okay. So let's look at, so we'll start there. Now I'm going to pull up another one. Oh my gosh. When I do the show on autism, you will understand why I just sung that. All right. So now, just to give some more context for what has kept going for that. So September 19, 2023 and onward. So every assembly, the UN has confirmed their report that they gave then in August over and over again. March 25, 2024, UN Chief Antonio Guterres has called for reparations to address the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade and systemic racism that persists today. So that was as of March 25th, 2024. Okay. Then next one, we're going to add another thing here. Quit singing. Okay, let me pull this other one. We need the Human Rights Watch. That's this one. Okay. Human Rights Watch submits general recommendation on reparations. So this is March 14th of this year. Okay. So this is an article on it here. So it gives good information. Sorry, having a little bit of a technical issue here. Okay. Let me make sure you guys are seeing the right one. And you're not. Let me take this one down and pull the right one up. Okay, so this here is the article on it, but you can pull up the PDF. Okay, we got the right one going. Okay, so Adric says Kamala with sarcasm. Okay, so this is where the Human Rights Watch submitted to the UN committee for the elimination of racial discrimination, they had their recommendation. So this article is from Human Rights Watch, okay, where they did it. So obviously they talk about the largest forced migration. I tend to call it human trafficking because we don't want to lighten the language, right? Millions lost their lives. Everybody else was enslaved into chattel slavery, not just regular everyday slavery, which is bad enough, but to chattel slavery that was hereditary, right? And then anti-Blackness became widespread and also codified into law. So, look at like 400 years of, think about the video that I played in the beginning, right? So this is their take on it, the Human Rights Watch. And, I love this part. Formal apologies are not enough on their own. And we can't even get a formal apology here in the United States. Isn't that wild, right? So states have tried to avoid legal responsibility by arguing that the policies that enabled slavery and colonial crimes were not prohibited under domestic or international law at the time of their respective commission, and that there was accordingly no violation of the law, right? But remember what I talked about in that video. Nuremberg already said, legal precedents, this is their ruling. Nuremberg says, following orders or following the law does not absolve you of the immorality of the action. So it's still wrong, correct? Let's see. Leon says, Maggie, I'm sorry to say this, but the United Nations are full of, I would say that's crap. This is simply passive-aggressive behavior towards America because of funds being cut in the last 10 years. Personally, I feel like they need to quit relying on the United States for funding, because then they would not allow the United States and de facto Israel to get away with the crimes against humanity that they are allowed to get away with, because America funds them. So they've got their noses squarely up the ass of whoever is the president of the United States at any given time. And so we can see what the UN is doing as performance, because they don't have any teeth, but that's because they feel like they cannot bite the hand that feeds them, right? Oh, yeah, Adrix says Kamala sarcasm. All right. Adrian says, trust me, the UN is basically a paper tiger only meant to greenlight American colonialism, but it's good to have in your back pocket as a talking point against the Kirkites. Totally agree. Totally agree. Especially when they keep talking about crimes against humanity, right? Right? Because again, we do not need to soften the language. We don't need to make people feel better about the atrocities. We don't need to soften the language. All right. Andrea says maybe the UN would have some paper fangs if Ralph Bunche, who is Black and the founder of what became the UN, hadn't been usurped by the American colonialism crowd. Yeah. Leon says that's facts too. I agree, Maggie. Yeah. And if we ever get to a time when, our president, our secretary of war, the head of the FBI, if any of those people ever end up in world court, the leader of Israel, any of them ever end up in a world court, the UN will play a big piece in that. So it is good to know where their mind's at and what they're doing, just for that reason alone. So then the United Nations working group of experts, they have a working group of experts on people of African descent and the special rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, is working on draft articles. So they're trying to put up like legal articles on crimes against humanity that are currently under deliberation by the International Law Commission. This is where it becomes important, because if anybody is put on trial in the world court, which can and has happened, right? Last time was the Nazis. It can happen. So let me pull this one up. So we want this one. And make sure I get to the right one. So this is that particular work group who is working on draft articles on crimes against humanity. Okay, they are working on it now, right? It is under deliberation by the International Law Commission, and it includes racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, related intolerance, and a lot of the historical crimes against humanity. So this would be the first time that it would be codified into any type of law, that what happened to American descendants of slavery, what happened to the Africans who were kidnapped, trafficked, murdered, raped, tortured for years and years and years, and everything that happened even after the partial abolition of slavery, because it has not been fully abolished, is a crime against humanity. So this would be the first time that it is legally stated that it's a crime against humanity. So this is another one that you can look up. You can get the PDF, you can print it, you can save it on these draft articles that is being put up. Okay. It's about 4 pages. It's not bad. These are some answers, right? So when you submit documentation, usually, especially if it's academic or is as important of this, they're going to come back with questions. And so these are some of the answers that they give. So, this last sentence, and the Africans and people of African descent, Asians and people of Asian descent, and indigenous peoples were victims of these acts and continue to be victims of their consequences. And again, they're using very specific language here. So this is about 4 pages. You see here it talks about mass incarceration. Obviously, that's still going on now. And then some specific recommendations to add to the articles on crimes against humanity, expressing the right to reparations for crimes against humanity in language sufficient to include reparations for historical injustices, including the transatlantic slave trade. So these are things that we can definitely be in support of. However we can let people know that we are in support of this. We can get the information out. We can let the UN know. And some of us, a couple years ago, filed with the UN charging or accusing the United States of committing crimes against humanity currently against Black people. So if you haven't done that, it's pretty easy. You go on the UN website and it says, hey, do you want to report a crime against humanity? And you say, you know what, I sure do. And you click it and you fill out the information, because the more complaints they get about crimes against humanity that is being committed in the country that you live in, the more it bolsters this work that they're doing. So please feel free to be able to do that. Let me take that off. Okay. Let's see. This is the best apology we can get. Cohen in Tennessee, and the apology was a bill. Oh, okay. All right. Didn't know anything. Oh, yeah, Vincent, the Bilderbergs. Yeah. Yeah, the Bilderbergs. Okay, so now we're going to move into some Christian nationalism, because Christian nationalism codifies anti-Black racism and misogyny. And sort of the whispered part is they also codify child sex abuse, which we're going to talk about more in another upcoming show, because Christian nationalism is against child marriage laws. And we know why. I mean, we've all heard the reports about the pastors and the preachers and the people and yada, yada, yada. So that'll be in an upcoming show. In fact, it's next week. Next week's is about the American politics of their death cult, right? The death cult of American politics. And I will be talking about child sex abuse as a part of that. Okay, so I'm gonna show some videos. I'm gonna give a little trigger warning because some of the stuff, especially as we get into it, is rough to hear, and it, pisses me off, and I assume it would piss other people off. So.
Even let's say that somebody was coming into our church and they're Black, and would they be eligible for membership in our church? Yes, of course they would. They'd be eligible for membership in our church. But would they be permitted to participate in, embody, and practice what I would call Black culture generally in our church? The answer is absolutely not. Why? Because the characteristics that mark Black culture as a generalization, in the same way Paul's talking about Cretans on Crete, they are evil, murderous, violent, bestial people. They steal, they kill, they destroy, they look like Satan.
Y'all hear that projection? I mean, who are you talking about? Right? I mean, this is projection at its finest. I mean, not necessarily the look like the devil or look like demons or whatever. That's kind of Mormon junk there, that stuff that Mormons say. But talking about the violence, right? The violence, right? This coming from white people who, in order to protect their ability to be white, like for their whiteness, have colonized, murdered, enslaved, murdered millions upon millions upon millions of people. And not just that. You look at even school shootings today are primarily, if not all, I think there was one person of color who did a school shooting, and I couldn't even tell you whether they were Black or not, but these are all young white men. The Unabomber was a white dude, right? Look at serial killers. I think there's been one Black serial killer. They're all white. One female, and she was white. Okay, so the projection is wild here. It is wildly outrageous. Unfortunately, this person is a pastor. So let's keep looking.
Term Christian nationalist, let me tell you where that comes from. They know the term white nationalist is a very bad term, and they don't want to be put in that category. So, white supremacy going to remix it. So it's okay, let's not call ourselves white nationalists. Let's call ourselves Christian nationalists.
Right. And this is what's going on today, right? Because when they say Christian, what they mean. You know what they mean. Think about what's going on with Turning Point right now, which it was kind of a funny thing because it came out that Turning Point was going to put on an all-American halftime show. All-American, okay? And then everybody came back and said Bad Bunny's American. And the funniest part, which I'm not sure how funny it is, it's kind of sad. So many of these MAGA folks, these Christian nationalist folks, did not know that Puerto Rico was part of America, was part of the United States, right? And then they're like, well, we want a Christian. Okay, well, Bad Bunny is Christian. So then Turning Point said, no, it's fake news. We're not doing that. That's fake. So then it comes out that it was fake. And then they turn around and say, we're putting on an all-American halftime show. And so you know what they're saying when they're like, we want somebody who is Christian, who is American, even though Bad Bunny is Christian and American. Guess what he's not? He's not white. And it has nothing to do with being Christian or American, because they didn't have a problem with Coldplay, with YouTube, with U2, Paul McCartney, Shakira. They were okay with Shakira. Why? Because female. They're okay with females of color entertaining them. But they're definitely not okay with anybody of color, especially if they look black. You can even look black. Then they're not okay with that. You're not American. And they will even literally call white people real Americans. So this Christian nationalism is just a ruse to say white. It is a ruse. Hi, Rael. Thank you for being here. Spainman says, express outrage over a drug deal gone bad in Chicago while excusing violence in other parts of the world. 100%, right? Because if they're doing it, it's okay. Right? It's okay when you're doing it. It's not okay when I do it, right? Yeah, definitely. Adrian says you have to tie these definitions back to Lee Atwater and his hot mic incident. Adrian, if you get a chance, I remember you showing this to me, but I cannot repeat it verbatim. If you get the opportunity, can you find the link, put it in the chat, and I will pull it up on this live, because you are 100% correct about where a lot of this comes from. And that president who said, if you can convince the poorest white man that he is better than the best black man, then he will empty his pockets for you. That stuff too, right? Okay, so let's keep going here, because this is something that I hear and it drives me nuts, because I bring it up a lot, even on other people's shows. Okay, let's watch this.
They are sinful to the core. They have besetting sins that are like fatherlessness, sexual immorality. They molest children at a high rate.
I bring this up all the time. They molest children at a high rate is projection. It is utterly false. Utterly false. White men commit a majority of all crimes. And some people will say, well, because white people are a majority of the population. No, they are not. They absolutely are not. This is why they freak out about the Great Replacement, blah, blah, blah. The pure, I guess, white people are not a majority of the population. And definitely white men are not a majority of the population. White men are roughly 29% of the country's population. They commit 56% of all violent crimes. All violent crimes. 29% of the population, and they're committing 56% of all violent crimes. Now, dependent upon the child sex crime, these same 29% of the population are committing between 80 to 92% of child sex crimes. That means that remaining 8% is shared amongst all other races and ethnicities. So white males who are non-Hispanic ethnically are committing between 80 to 92% of all child sex crimes. And you and I both know that the court works really hard to allow white men to plead down to lesser crimes or to release them from crimes as much as possible. We saw that one kid who raped that girl out by a dumpster. And then because he had a great swimming career ahead of him, it was just, he's just let go, right? So we know that this happens. We could come up with 50 examples. We could come up with 100 examples. So the fact that the court system works really hard to let white men go, and still they are convicted of 80 to 92% of child sex crimes, then what is this dude even talking about? We all probably saw that video where that white mother was telling her white little girl that if you're ever lost, find a black man. Why? Because statistically speaking, and even including violent crimes, statistically speaking, that black man is going to be the safest person to be with. And that's including white women. So this projection drives me nuts, and that's why I bring up those stats a lot. So feel free to use those stats any and everywhere, especially when they bring up Chicago, which is like the 19th safest city in all of United States. So what about Chicago is just like a non sequitur dumb thing. I shouldn't say non sequitur, but it is a dumb thing to say. Feel free to use those stats against those kind of statements. But he says these things, and people who believe in and support anti-Black racism go, oh yeah, that's got to be true. It's totally true. I totally believe that, right? When all they have to do is just look at your own family. Look at your own family. There's a reason why they say 1 in 3 children will experience some type of sexual abuse before they reach 18. There's a reason. There's a reason. And I'll just throw out the word Epstein here as well. Definitely not a Black person, right? Okay. So Spainman says, going back to the days of Bill the Butcher and the nativists, or just letting the mask slip off. Yeah. Leon says a pastor here in Texas just got 6 months. I remember seeing that. The government is telling you what they think your daughters are worth. Right. And didn't the spiritual advisor to President Trump just got arrested? Why? Sexual abuse of a 12-year-old girl. 12. This is prepubescent. 12. So, and you guys saying this kind of stuff, it reminds me of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, which people love to say is about, because homosexuality is bad. It literally says in the book that Sodom and Gomorrah was burned because people were being such a-holes to each other. That's literally what it says. It doesn't say anything about committing sodomy. But it reminds me that when the angels came to the house, and then all of these people came to the door like, hey, those 2 dudes in your house are hot. Send them out here so we can have sex with them. He said, no, I'm not letting these 2 dudes out, but do you guys just want my little girls? You can do whatever you want to them. I'm not letting. And this is touted in the Bible of a way to be a good Christian. Don't let them harm the angels. Give them your little daughters. It's fine. All right, Rael says eugenics was a concept that used poor whites from Europe to define criminality as based on being poor. Inherent criminality as a concept was formulated by elite Europeans against the poor, right? And then they bring it and they use it eugenics against Black people, and just like what this guy said. That's what besetting means, by the way, guys. It's eugenics. Besetting means it's inherent to who you are as a person. So when he says they have these besetting sins of violence and fatherlessness and blah, 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 he's saying that's literally who Black people are at their core. That's what a besetting sin is. It's like a permanent sin. Sorry. Okay. Oh, Adrian says that's the guy in Texas. Okay, that's the spiritual leader. All right. Spain man, just boys being boys, just locker room, right? Leon says white trash, the 400-year untold story of class in America. I have heard of that, and I still have not watched it. Is it a book? Because I thought it was a documentary. I think it's a documentary. Or they made a documentary out of the book, but I have heard of this. Adrian says eugenics, the reason you don't have single-payer healthcare. Right, because Black people might get healthcare, and we cannot have that. We cannot have that. And also, just in general, they don't necessarily want poor people to be better. They just don't. Because to be that rich, they require a permanent underclass. Ryle says it's a book. Okay. I got to get that book. Oh, thank you for putting in the link. Thank you, Leon. Ryle says he has the book and it's a great read. Good. Okay, well, that might be the next book. The last one I got was The Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi. That's the next one, but it's a little tiny one, so that'll be easy to read. So we might just add this on. All right, so let's keep going. There's more and more to see.
I bet you there's a lot of Africans, if they hadn't been brought over, not saying it was right, don't misunderstand, not justifying the slavery in the situation, but God, I still believe, used it. And now I'm sure there's a lot of Africans that got the gospel, and they're in heaven right now because they got the gospel. You know, what would be better? For them to have lived their entire life in Africa free, doing their voodoo or whatever, and then dying and going to hell, right? Or what happened? And then they go to heaven. They get the opportunity. Now, again, it doesn't justify it. The ends do not justify the means, but this is how God works. This is what God does in the Bible. And we have black people in here. I don't think any of you guys were ever slaves. I was never a slave. It's like, white privilege. You were never a slave. You were never living during a time, unless you're very old, like 60 or 70 maybe, or 80 years old, you're never even living during a time where segregation was a thing in this country. I mean, what are you crying about? Nothing even happened to you. You're just making up stuff. You can't look at the facts that I was reading and just attribute that to some kind of white privilege. It's not real. Get over it. Quit having all the excuses. Why don't you take some responsibility for your choices, be content with whatever situation you were born into, and make the most of it.
Has anybody else, has anybody in here who is black, okay? Have you ever been told, when you're talking about slavery, reparations, any of that kind of stuff, have you ever been told, well, at least you get to be here. At least you get to be in the United States. It's the greatest country in the world. At least you get to be around us, the white folks. Ryle says, what a clown. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Adrian says, see how I've progressively crashed out? Yes. Yes. All right, we're going to watch more.
If slavery never happened, then you would be in a grass hut. Yeah. Right, well, we need reparations. Your reparations are that you get to live in America. You're welcome. You're welcome.
You get to have the Christian religion.
That's
live
right.
better than your ancestors.
The greatest moment in history for any brown or black country is the moment that the white man's ships arrive on your shore.
I literally titled that little video clip, Has Never Been to Africa. Because he just makes the assumption that if you were not kidnapped, trafficked, abused, raped, killed, put into slavery, that you'd be living in a grass hut. Now, show of hands. And I don't care if you are, I don't care what race is not necessarily a thing, but you know what I'm saying, what ethnicity or phenotype you are. Okay? Put a 1 in the chat. Replay gang, do the same thing. Put a 1 if you would prefer, so this is point number 1, if you would prefer a grass hut to 400 years of abuse. I would put a 1. I would prefer a grass hut. What the hell's wrong with the grass hut? Okay, so that's number 1. When he thinks 400 years of abuse is better because you live in a better house. What? That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Oh, look at the 1s coming in. Okay. But point number 2 is, have you just never, first of all, Africa is the hugest continent. It is the biggest continent on planet Earth. It is huge. And there is more ethnic diversity from the top of Africa to the tip of Africa than there is globally. So there's a ton of different people, right? But here in the United States, all we get to see of Africa is grass huts and women with their titties out and Christian missionaries, playing poverty porn for everybody to get money, right? But if you actually look, there are cities, there are metropolis all over the continent. There are very progressive areas of Africa. There are very developed areas of Africa. And for, the white supremacists, I'm not just talking about South Africa, right? And I'm not just talking about Egypt either, which the Arabs are in charge of right now. But weren't always. And then also just looking at the continent historically, huge cities built by what we would deem Black people, but like we would say sub-Saharan, right? Or mid-African Black people. Egypt, Kemet, Nubia, Timbuktu, hell, Mansa Musa, right? All Black. So who are you to say what would have happened in 400 years? To just make the assumption, because you have a eugenics mind and you think you're better than everybody else, that people would not have progressed without colonialism? Because colonialism still has their foot on the neck of a lot of countries in Africa, where they can't even keep their own stuff. So shout out to Traore. He's like my personal hero right now. So, and you know, people agree with me, much prefer a grass hut to that crap. Okay. Yeah. Adrian says, welcome. Yeah. He'd welcome people into his grass hut, right? Raul says, the irony is many whites conveniently forget their experiences in Europe at the hands of the crown. Right. And I bring that up about my ancestry, right? That the island that I come from and my people come from was hostilely taken over by those Germanic people, right? Who are the monarchy of UK now, right? I will not forget, right? Nobody is more miseducated than the Western white, right? Because again, if you convince the poorest white person that he's better than the richest Black man, all you got to do is change the history. Don't tell him anything, right? Leon says, Timbuktu, one of the original states of the Jews. I did not know that. I thought that was, I thought they had a great library there and that Mansa Musa built that library. You know, and then think about the Library of Alexandria, right? Like, these are Black people who are the most highly educated people on the planet, right? Then you have, you know, the great philosophers, the great Greek philosophers. Where did they get their education? Oh, from Black people in Kemet. And they will tell you that. If you read their writings, they will tell you that. Adrian says, the fallacy lies in the fact that we will never be able to quantify the condition of Africa had it not been stripped of its human and natural resources. Literally arrested development. Exactly. Like, what could these countries have been? What could the entire continent have been? Look what it was before it was colonized. These amazing civilizations with all this amazing technology. And then your argument is, well, at least you don't have to live in a grass hut. This is the dumbest mess I have ever heard. Whew, I'm sorry. I get on soapbox about these things. So the next thing, we're going to look at some clips from a documentary called Bad Faith. I highly recommend watching this documentary. If you've got a chance to watch it today, watch it today, right? The documentary is called Bad Faith. It is on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube. So watch that, but we're going to watch some clips from the documentary Bad Faith.
Faith is primary for me. Faith is the first thing that I build my life around. My reaction to January 6th was my stomach churned. I was nauseous. I wanted to throw up. People had Christian flags. They were praying on bullhorns outside the Capitol while beatings were occurring inside the Capitol. It was a co-opting of my faith that is supposed to be a faith of peace. From a security standpoint, it was also devastating.
Yeah, so I think a lot of us even feel this today. Like, I have made it clear on my channel that, you know, I think Jesus was great. I'm not necessarily Christian because I think what Christianity has become literally since the year 700. It's become a supremacist cult. I don't necessarily call myself a Christian, but I definitely follow Jesus. And it is so offensive to hear people use their Christianity, much like I talked about just a minute ago about Zionists, as a weapon. It's a weapon against other people, and then also as a shield against accountability. It's so offensive. Leon says many Jewish families in Timbuktu descended from North African Jews from Morocco, and it's written about in the Middle Ages. Okay, so you're talking about the original, the OG Jews, not the like Ashkenazi type Jews. Okay, yeah, now I totally get what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Vincent says the only way to speak to the government is in their own language. They speak BS. So, yeah, Paul of Tarsus. Yeah, Leon. And I've said that many times before because there's a lot of information out there that the Romans under the Holy Roman Empire made up Saul, made up Paul of Tarsus to add all of those books and letters into the biblical readings to create this weapon of control. So I definitely agree with you saying that. Andrea says, my grandmother used to say there are more devils in the church than in all of the slums of the world. 100%. 100%. I would much rather, of course, we were poor as children, not as poor as everyone, but I mean, we weren't the poorest people, but we were poor. My mother made our clothes, there was periods of time we had the government cheese, we lived in a little small house, but we did have a house. I mean, there was that. And I would much rather hang out with good people who are poor. Most people who are poor are good people. They understand what it's like and they help their fellow man, They don't want other people to be in the same position. And there's a lot of community aid amongst poor populations. Like, I would much rather be there. Much rather. Than church, yeah. Leon says, Saint Tarsus Paul said, hey, Jesus, come assimilate my form of Christianity. Let's turn Jesus into something he was actually not at all, ever. Yeah. Adrian says, even if Saul was made up, where did it say that he studied? Because it was okay to study it back or say it back then because, the Arabs were taking over. So nobody really thought about how someday we would be able to pull the genetic information of the bodies of the pharaohs and prove that they were sub-Saharan Africans, that they were Nubian, right? They didn't think that was going to happen to know that, oopsie, all these people who talk about studying in Egypt were studying under the learned, who were what? Black, not Arabic. Okay, so let's keep going.
The galvanizing force behind the assault on the U.S. Capitol was a political movement known as Christian Nationalism. The leaders had a long-range plan to seize power and impose their political vision by any means necessary. They knew that the only way to create a theocratic Christian nation was to overthrow our democracy. And that's what they set out to do.
Theocratic Christian nation, right? This is the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. And as you guys might have noticed, when Trump was running and people brought up Project 2025, he was like, yeah, never heard of it. I don't know those people. But for anybody who looked into it, we saw that who was he hanging out with? People from the Heritage Foundation, authors of Project 2025. Who did he appoint to his cabinet? People from the Heritage Foundation, authors of Project 2025. And then recently, he said he was going to go talk to, who is it, Vote, who was a huge part of Project 2025. And Trump literally said, of Project 2025 fame. So he's not hiding it now. He's always known what Project 2025 was, and he's always been on board with it. He's always been okay with it because Project 2025 operates on supremacy. Now, they say Christian supremacy, but as long as Trump says he's Christian, he gets to remain in the elite group, right? He gets to continue to use that supremacy. All right, let's keep going.
Because it's about power. And in the pursuit of that power, history teaches us terrible, terrible things happen.
Tonight, as a nationwide firestorm continues, following Friday's Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade.
Clarence Thomas suggested the court could re-examine decisions on contraception and same-sex marriage.
This is another major ruling from the court's emboldened conservative majority, resetting that delicate balance between church and state.
With just 22 days until Election Day, democracy is very much on the ballot.
The Trump show's second act that will test his grip on the Republican Party today.
You can call us extremists, you can call us domestic terrorists. You know who else was called a lot of names? Jesus.
See how they rewrote Jesus? You know, the person of peace, right? That's all he ever taught was peace. Yeah, he turned over some tables when he got ticked off, right? And he told people exactly who they were. But he was nothing like what they're doing. You know, this woman is equating Jesus with a J6er. Still rewriting Christianity into white supremacy.
The vast majority of Republicans have embraced the big lie. They have kowtowed to whatever Trump wants because Trump has a loyal base of support.
The biggest thing coming out of January 6th is that people are emboldened to take matters into their own hands.
And we see this time and time again, right? You will see MAGA folks, which this is a cult. You will see white Christian nationalists, MAGA folks, stopping Black people on the street and saying, are you supposed to be here? Let me see your ID. What's your name? They are acting as an arm of the state. You see, you know, is something as minor as, you know, the Karens creating big deal and asking for the manager because this is their country and they view it that way. So they are taking matters into their own hands and they are emboldened to do so. All right. I thought I still had another video, but that's okay. There's definitely more to look at. So the next thing that I want to bring up, let me share this screen. That is not the one that I want. So I'm going to pull this up. Hold on. Let me get this pulled up. Okay. Now I will share it. Okay. Let me look at some comments real quick. Vincent says the Secret Service only calls one type of person. Could be. Adrian says Russell Bott is a member of the Office of Management and Budget. Huge appointment. Yeah. And huge contributor to Project 2025. Right? Andreas says, Gore Vidal, live from Golgotha. Paul saw the juggling showman, pimping Twinkies, and scrambling for fame. I mean, I probably couldn't have said it better. All right, so let's talk about the definition of fascism. And this is just on Google. You know, sometimes Google can be your friend, right? Let's just look. Let's look at it. Fascism is an authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology that advocates for a dictatorial leader, a single-party government, and the forcible suppression of opposition. It emphasizes the nation or race above individual interests and is characterized by a high degree of control over society and the economy. try to tell me you don't see that. You definitely see. I mean, we see all the nationalism coming out, that we have members of politics stating we need to be a Christian nationalist country. We have a lot of people talking about nationalists, right? I mean, Turning Point saying we're going to have an American halftime show, that's nationalist, right? They advocate for a dictatorial leader. Twice recently, Trump has brought up, how did he say that? It was something like, sometimes people tell me, maybe having a dictator isn't too bad. And I don't know, ha ha ha, maybe I don't want it, but I could be. He's brought up being a dictator twice. And then people are like, ha ha ha, it's just a joke. It's never going to happen. Single party government. What states and cities is he going after? Who has he said is an enemy? Anybody who disagrees with him. And the forcible suppression of opposition. Again, who's he going after, right? It emphasizes the nation or the race. So when they say Christian, we already talked about this, you know what they're saying, above individual interests, and is characterized by a high degree of control over society and the economy. We're here, folks. We are here. So let's talk about the core characteristics to say, okay, are we really here? Okay. These are common features of fascist movements, right? Extreme nationalism. We've got it. Promotes a sense of national glory and superiority. They say that all the time, often rooted in myths of past greatness or victimhood. This can lead to xenophobia and hostility toward groups deemed outsiders. Outsiders. And you will hear a lot of times these people will refer to white Americans as real Americans and other people as not real Americans. Okay. A cult of the leader. MAGA, guys, a central charismatic leader is portrayed as a national savior. Think about all the pictures where they depicted Trump as Jesus, who embodies the country's destiny. This creates an unquestioning obedience, and we have that now, to the leader and their political party. Militarism. Fascist movements celebrate martial virtues and the use of violence as a tool for national renewal. So we just had Pete Hegseth and Trump talking to the military, and they're going to weaponize the military. They put $1 trillion into the military. This often includes glorifying war. Oh, did we just rename the Department of Defense to the Department of War? And creating paramilitary groups. ICE, anybody? Suppression of opposition. Democratic liberties, political dissent, and individual rights are viewed as weaknesses that undermine the state. Think about everybody that they just deemed as domestic terrorist groups, even Antifa. And oh my God, that is so funny, because the one chick said that they caught the girlfriend of the founder of Antifa. So number one, Antifa started because of Nazi Germany. So I doubt seriously they caught the girlfriend of the person who created the Antifa movement. And number two, there is no Antifa network. She equates it to all these underground networks and blah, 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 blah. There is no Antifa network. Antifa means anti-fascist. So people who are Antifa are anti-fascist. So if you're against Antifa, by definition, you are pro-fascism. Okay, let me keep going. Opposition is brutally suppressed through propaganda, state control of the media, and violence. Saying that Portland is war-torn and on fire. I think he forgets that, we have the internet and we can see that it's not. Controlled economy. Though it protects private property, fascism typically eliminates the autonomy of large corporations and suppresses labor power. The economy is tightly regulated to serve the state's nationalistic goals. Tariffs, bailing out Venezuela instead of farmers, tightly controlled. Fixation on national decline. The ideology is often fueled by a perception of national humiliation or victimhood. The leader promises to restore the nation's strength and purity, make America great again. We're here, folks. We're here. Okay? This is not exaggerating. This is not hyperbole. This is not, I hate Republicans. There are a lot of Republicans who, and conservatives, who are anti-Trump, who see MAGA for what it is, who see Trump for who he is. This is not about Republicans. This is not about America. I'm an American citizen. I like America. There's a lot of beautiful things about America and American people. I'm a humanist, people. This has to do with we are under a fascist regime right now. Right now. Whether you voted for Trump or not, this is where we are. Okay? So I'm going to make a statement that may be hard for some people to hear, as if that wasn't hard enough. Portland has the most famous frog. I love that video. Have you guys seen the video where it's the people who are protesting, right? There are protesters outside the ICE facility, but they're wearing those Halloween costumes that blow up. Like there's a unicorn and there's a frog, and there's this video of a frog and a picture of the frog, the blow up guy, who's standing there. And then there's all these ICE agents who are like staring him down. And then he kind of does a dance move. That's Portland on fire, folks. All right. So I'm going to make this statement that may be hard for some people to hear, but they cannot denounce what they did to Native Americans, and they definitely cannot denounce chattel slavery because they're still operating human trafficking networks. And at some point, we may or may not get into that. Okay. Andreas says, keep Portland weird. I love it. Spainman says, I'm sure that ironically, a lot of Trumpers were the same ones that claimed to be all about the Constitution and being principled under Obama. I mean, these are the same people who fought the mask mandates, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but they were freaking out about mask mandates. And now they're all members of ICE and keep their faces completely covered for once. Huh. Okay. I believe this is me. Okay. I believe what is becoming clear is that the revolution will not be televised. We already know that, but the propaganda will. All revolution came as a result of working together toward a common goal. Think about Epstein files. You have people across all types of races, creeds, colors, ethnicities, political parties, whatever, all agreeing on releasing the Epstein files, right? Working together towards a common goal. We don't have to believe in everything each other does, right? There are a few misconceptions with this, right? Not everybody has to be on board or even have totally aligned belief systems to work towards that common goal, right? Epstein files, that's a big one. Number 2, citizens are not powerless. We learned about silent quitting from Gen Z. We are not powerless. There are more of us than them. Number 3, historically, there have been groups that usurp movements, right? We have to be wary of interlopers dressed as allies, but we cannot shut the door to support and assistance. Now, there's a caveat with that. Every single time American descendants of slavery or foundational Black Americans have had a movement, they've always been infiltrated. Many times, those same Black people would have allies towards a movement who were quick to drop them after they got what they wanted. Okay, so other people out there who are the same race, ethnicity, phenotype as me, listen to me clearly. Quit asking Black people to do your dirty work for your movement. They are always the ones who pay the price. Okay. All right. And number 4, the most widespread weapon of the powers that be is the use of shaming. Guilting and shaming is the most pervasive across social media and media at large. In fact, the citizenry has taken upon themselves to guilt and shame others as proxies for the government. I am not saying that we should not hold people accountable. That is not what I'm saying. It's quite the opposite. We must be truth tellers, radical truth tellers. Radical means universal, all the way around, at all times. Radical truth tellers. We must remain authentic and grounded in the truth at all times. Okay? One lie begets another, and it undermines the validity of the information and the speaker. Be the truth. Live the truth. All right, let's look at these last comments. Leon says, I argued that fascism has already been here. Okay, these two guys check off 2 out of 5 boxes, and these guys check out 2 out of 3, and continued, meaning as a group, it is what it is. Yeah, we're here. Vincent's not a huge fan of America. Okay, so I appreciate you guys being here. This one's, quite a bit longer, almost twice as long as my normal Sunday videos, but I wasn't here last Sunday. So, this is also one of those things I wanted to go all the way through to the end to have that discussion. Like I said, next Sunday, we're going to be talking about the death cult of American politics. And then the week after that, we'll have a little bit of a lighter show. But this coming Wednesday, we're going to continue on. We're almost done with the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. We'll continue with that book review. After we're done with that book, we're going to go on to another book, a couple more books, and we'll continue those book reviews on Wednesday nights. So if I don't see you this Wednesday, I hope to see you next Sunday. Before I forget, I love you, I miss you, and you're my favorite. And now I'm going to show you a picture of my dog. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.